If you like working with outboard gear as much as I do, then you probably run into a lot of the same problems that I do as well. This stuff is fun to work with, it is fun to record with, but routing can be kind of a pain, and using a patch bay, which, I've got one, but it's not always fun because there are just headaches that come with latency, with hardware inserts, and with moving things around every time you use them. So what a lot of people do, myself included, is they set up kind of the way that they normally would, and then they just sort of leave everything hardwired, and then they only go behind the rack or really mess with the patch bay when they actually really need to change something. And I recently added this summing mixer. I don't know if you can see it, but I just added this to my setup recently, and that means it was time to mess with my ins and my outs. And I finally have enough pieces of outboard again that it was time to pull out my patch bay and wire it all back up. And because of that, I decided, hey, let's see what's out there with digital patch bays. Let's see if there's anything that's a little more plug and play, a little more user friendly, because I remember the first time I bought a patch bay, that was an option, but I didn't end up going with it because they were super expensive and I feel like they weren't that developed. And to my surprise, I found this unit right here. Now this is a FreqPort FreqInOut, pun intended, frequency, input, output. Those are music words, So this is a fun little piece of hardware that's got inputs and outputs on the back, line ins and outs, and then it's USB powered. It has a little screen, power supply, a switch, and that's it. And then on the front, there's literally nothing except a little status LED to tell you that it's turned on. And so FreqPort was kind enough to send me this because I just had some questions about what it does and how it works. So after I make this video, I'm boxing it back up. I'm just borrowing it from them, but I just remembered, I have a channel where I talk about music gear. I have questions. I'm curious about how well it works. So why not just borrow one, make this video, send it back, and that way, if you have similar questions, they'll be answered as well. So I'm going to talk about my experience using this for about a week and whether or not I think it's a good choice for you or who it is a good choice for. So let's dig into it. Now, like I said, this thing is extremely simple. There is really no settings. There's nothing to screw up. All you do is plug it in with this USB cord. A nice thing about it is bus powered. The 12 volt DC is optional, so you can choose to power it externally, but if you want to use bus power like I did, then you can. Now, it comes with a nice branded USB-C cable, which doesn't make it sound any better or work any better, but it is a nice touch, so it's good to see that they're thinking about that kind of stuff. But yeah, my experience with this has been overall very good. So the FreqPort, when you open it up, you're going to get a card with the website to register it. So you make an account, which I know everything has an account now, but that's just how it works. So I'm not going to hold it against them. But yeah, you make an account, you download the plugin, and then when you plug this into your computer, you now have access to these ports through a plugin. So for example, in my DAW, which is Pro Tools, I will just pull up their FreqPort FreqInOut plugin, and then it gives me an input matrix. So all of the hardware that I have plugged into this, I can now use as if it's a plugin. And I know what you're thinking. If you are someone who already uses hardware inserts, how is this different? Well, it's different in a couple of ways. So for one, when you're using a hardware insert, you have to think about latency. You have to think about the round trip of the audio leaving your interface, going through the gear and coming back. One nice thing about this FreqPort device is that the audio just is handled with latency or no latency. I'm not 100% sure the ins and outs of it. Again, no pun intended, but I didn't experience any latency right out of the box. So the timing was spot on using this thing, whereas a hardware insert, you have to worry about delay compensation. So the fact that this just handles that out of the box is great. And I didn't have any timing issues, any latency issues, which as far as ease of use goes, going to give that a big 5 stars. Now the plugin is very simple. It mainly is just where you're going to choose the order of how your hardware is set up. So let's say you have an EQ, a compressor, a guitar pedal, and a delay unit, right? Set up on this. So you could put all 4 of those on one track, and then you could change the order of them. And it has a matrix internally where it's going to say, okay, if you have EQ, compressor, and then delay, but you want to move the EQ and the compressor around, you just drag and drop within the plugin. So you're not doing that with 4 instances of the plugin on one track. It's 1 instance of the plugin on the track, and then you're using their matrix in the plugin to change the order, which is cool. It's handy. Again, it's not like earth-shatteringly different than using a hardware insert, but if you want to talk about convenience, then that is a nice thing. It beats having to take patch cables and remember what's what and, you know, plug things in and out and worry about changing your patching just to hear something and then putting it back if you don't like it. Just using your mouse to drag around the matrix in the plugin, I'm going to give that a big thumbs up because it is really convenient. Now, I've said the word convenient a couple times in the last few minutes, and that is because really when I think about this unit, I think convenience is the #1 factor. So the settings that it has are cool. The plugin is great. Actually, in the plugin, there is a mix knob, which is cool. Like I was using a chorus pedal to mess around with some guitar tones after they were already recorded. And that chorus pedal does not have a mix knob. But in the plugin, you can use the mix knob, which a hardware insert cannot do, at least in Pro Tools right now, unless it can, which if it can, let me know. But having a mix knob for gear that does not already have a mix knob, huge thumbs up. But anyway, convenience. The main thing about this that I really like is that it doesn't give you a lot of pushback to try stuff. So for example, if I record a band, which this happens often, that has a couple pieces of cool gear, like one of the people I record a lot has a Space Echo, which I don't have. If I had this just sitting up on my desk, then they bring their Space Echo, they can sit it right here. I can pop 2 patch cables in, and all of a sudden their Space Echo is a plugin. That's not something that I would typically bother doing for just one session, running, you know, someone else's gear as an insert. I think it's really cool that you can kind of do that really quickly if someone's just visiting and they have a piece of gear that you want to throw into your chain. The other thing that I really like about it is that it kind of separates your post-processing world from your recording and tracking stuff, which for some people this may be a negative, but for me it kind of is a positive. So I don't record through my hardware EQ or compressor or my bus compressor that's down below. I have the Bluey here, and then I've got these 2 Audioscape units. Shout out Audioscape. The EQ and the bus comp. And then I have this summing mixer. I only really use those after the fact. I'm not recording through them. So to me, having this here, it really does make it nice when you're just mixing and doing post-production to pull up the gear that you want to use and use it. And then you can have your interface IO used for the things that you're tracking through and the things like headphone outputs, really all kinds of stuff that you would like to, you know, keep separate. It is nice in that regard. So hopefully that makes sense. Basically what I'm saying is like you can have your tracking stuff set up for tracking and your mixing stuff set up for mixing, and you don't have to patch out your headphone output number 6 on your hardware outputs from your interface to then patch in an EQ, and then when someone comes to record, you have to patch it back up to be their headphone output. You can just keep them kind of siloed off, and the things you're using to track, you can track with. The things you're using to mix, you can mix with. For me, that could be a big plus. I could see using something like this for that pretty often. Now, the third use case that I think this is great for is if you are an engineer that travels from studio to studio and you have some outboard gear that you really love. So one example, behind me, there's a BAE 1073 preamp. That is not mine. That is a good buddy of mine, David. He's an engineer and he owns that preamp, but he comes over here to record a lot, and he will bring that preamp, put it in my rack, wire it up. we'll record through it, and then he'll leave it sometimes. Other times he'll take it home, right? That's kind of a pain in the butt because now we have to go wire it up with my interface, etc. and so on. That's a preamp. Let's say you're a mixer and you travel to other studios often and you have one or two key pieces of hardware in a rack case, right? So let's say you have a bus comp, you have an EQ, compressor, whatever it is, you love it, you want to use it on more projects, but you're mixing at someone else's studio, or you're doing a project just traveling, whatever it is. Something like this, I can run the session through the interface that's already set up. I don't have to worry about someone else's studio's routing. I just plug the USB cable from the back of this unit into their computer or my computer, whichever it is. And then I can throw my gear up on the side and I can mix through the hardware with this unit. Their interface doesn't get touched. It's a totally clean, separate setup where you're not worrying about asking someone else to mess with their routing. So to me, that is a feature that I think is really cool. And that opens up a lot of possibilities for engineers and mixers who travel between studios, who rent other studios, but they have a couple key pieces of hardware that they love. So to me, those are kind of the main use cases that I could see myself really digging something like this. Now, I will talk about some of the things that maybe suggestions, maybe feedback, maybe downsides. I don't know what you want to call it. The USB port thing, that being the cool part, is also kind of one of the hangups for me. Just because like my current computer is a MacBook with 3 USB-C ports. So I've got a dongle that has my iLock, it has my MIDI keyboard, and it has a couple accessories plugged into it, you know, hard drive, whatever it is. Then I've got my interface in one, Thunderbolt interface. This is the next one. This is number 3. So if I'm using this, I am now out of ports. Not always the end of the world, but something to think about because it's also only got 4 channels. Now you can link 2 of these. You can plug another one into your computer and now you have 8 channels, but that's not going to work if you've got no USB ports. So to me, that is a bit of a negative because I think for my personal use, if I was going to buy something like this, I would want an 8-channel version, and they don't have 8 channels on one USB port. Now, I don't know if that's possible with their technology, with their hardware, whatever it is, but I'll say this. As far as value goes, I think what you're getting is a pretty solid deal for the price. So I know it's only 4 inputs, but think about it this way. This is about $600. $599, I want to say. I got to get this right. $599, yes. My patch bay, I did look this up. My patch bay and this, same exact price, right? This, you're getting 4 units. My patch bay, you can get a lot more units, but it's passive. It does nothing else. It doesn't do the mix knob. It doesn't do mid-side. It doesn't have a matrix on my computer where I can change things out. So I'm also mainly using the patch bay for the Bluey, the EQ, and the bus compressor, which is 1 stereo unit and 2 mono ones, which is 4 ins and outs. So if you think about it in a way, while this is more limited on inputs, for me personally, I'm really only using my patch bay for those 4 ins and outs. So I could kind of do everything I needed to do with just this, and it is the same price. However, if this was 8 channels, it was, you know, 1 rack space width, 19 inches, and it only took up 1 USB port, and it was $1,000, or 16 channels was $1,500, or whatever it is. At that point, I'm really seriously thinking about grabbing one because I would much rather use a 16 channel one of these than an analog patch bay that costs half as much. So as far as I'm concerned, this is one of those quality of life pieces of gear. It's a workflow enhancer. So if you see this and you think that's dumb, who would ever want that? That's stupid. Guess what? It's not for you. The same way I look at a mechanic's lift that picks the car up off the ground. I think that's dumb. Who needs that? I'll drive on some boards when I need to work on my car. However, if you see this video and you think, dang, that's really sick, I want that, then guess what? It's for you because It's a quality of life improvement that you're going to want. And if that's you, you're going to recognize it when you see it. So big thanks to Freqport for sending this over, the FreqInOut. I'm going to go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I like it. If it was bigger and had more connectivity, I would definitely be very, very interested in buying one. So if you end up making a big one, let me know. I'll definitely be one of the first people to buy it. If you want to get your own, I'm going to put the information down in the description. I don't think I'm going to have an affiliate link. Like, I'll just link it if you want to check it out. If you want to help the channel out, I do have Planner for sale, the Producer Planner. So check that out. Instead of doing a bunch of gear reviews and spamming you with affiliate links, that's how I like to support the channel. So if you want to get a Producer Planner, check that out. Also in the link in the description. Get the FreqInOut if it's up your alley. I think they do a really good job at what they're trying to do. And then watch this video next. All right, I'll see you next week with another video. Cool. Bye.